Hi, I'm Jeremy Clucci, and I'm here with Bill Post, our town manager, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the proposed town budget for the coming fiscal year, which we'll be discussing and voting on at town meeting on June 14th. So, hi, Bill.
Hey, Jeremy.
Thanks for sitting down with me for this.
Sure.
So for, to sort of kick it off, can you talk a little bit about some of the highlights of this year's proposed budget?
Sure. So in this year's budget, we are not offering a cost of living allowance adjustment for employees, which is the second year in a row that we have not done that. We are offering a 3% or proposing a 3% merit increase, which is the same as the current year that we're in now. And that obviously is based on merit, performance evaluations, and that sort of thing. So everybody's not guaranteed of 3%. A couple of other highlights in there is that we are looking at adding some hours to a deputy clerk position, office assistant position at the town office. 6 hours extra a week, and that essentially gets us closer to the number of hours for staff that we had when I started back in 2011. We're still not completely there yet, but we're getting closer to that level of service. Some of the other areas, we have 2 new bond payments this year for Public Works plow truck and for the Pork Point Road reconstruction that was done this past last summer. So those bond payments are new this year in the new budget, but we did pay off a road bond 3 years early in this year's budget, so there's some savings there as well. So even though the debt service is higher, it's not as high as it would have been if we didn't pay off that previous loan. Pretty much all the other budgets are very similar. Public Works ebbs and flows based on the winters that we've had.
Sure.
And so we'll have more money that will need to be spent on replacing the salt and the sand that we used this past winter. But other than that, the budget's pretty much the same. There are a couple of new items in the capital areas that I think that you might want to talk about. We've been budgeting in the operating budget money for repairs and maintenance at the town hall building and this building and the town office, and now I'm proposing that we actually create some reserve accounts and put that money into savings, if you will.
Sure.
So that we can address some projects that are more expensive than what I think can be handled in any given operating year.
So maybe we'll drill into that a little bit. Can you talk about what a reserve account is, why you see it as being the right direction to be moving in these areas?
Yeah, and the town hasn't had very many reserve accounts in previous years, and basically a reserve account is essentially like a savings account. So we're putting money aside a little bit at a time to try to build up our savings so that we can implement a major capital repair. For the town hall building, for instance, we need to paint the interior of the building, we need to replace the floor in the building. Those things are expensive and would negatively affect the operating budget in 1 year if they were budgeted in 1 year. So if we can do it over 2 or 3 years and put the money into a savings account or reserve account, then it doesn't affect the taxpayers all at once. The other one is some funding, $3,000 for cemetery maintenance. And that's one of the things that's been in the works with the town for the last few years, is trying to put money aside or budget money for cemetery improvements for those cemeteries that don't have any trust accounts and don't have any associations that are active, which is most of them in the community. And so we're proposing to put $3,000 into a reserve account to help with stone repair, tree removal, fences that may have been in disrepair or have fallen down, that type of thing, to try to get the cemeteries up, restored, and back to where they should be.
Great, thanks. There's also a new policy for considering non-municipal organization requests for funding. I'm wondering can you talk a little bit about that policy and what it meant for this year?
Sure. So the board had adopted a new policy around these types of requests for organizations such as Meridian Arts Center or BCDI or Spectrum Generations or any other non-municipal organization. And the policy essentially limits the amount of money that can be requested by each organization to a very small certain percentage of the operating budget. so that from each year it'll be different. That limit will be. This year the limit is about $1,500 to $1,600 per organization, and then there's an overall limit as well, so that you can't have 100 different organizations requesting $1,500. So there's an overall limit, and that limit is around, I think it's around $10,000 if I remember correctly. So this year we have 2 organizations that submitted requests, which was BCDI and Spectrum Generations. BCDI for $1,500 and Spectrum Generations for $1,495. And those both went through the process with the Finance Advisory Committee, went through a thorough review with them, and met state statute requirements for public purposes for municipal funding. And then were approved by the select board to go onto the town meeting warrant for consideration by the voters.
And those amounts, $1,500, $1,495, those, if I recall, in past years, it's usually, oftentimes the requests have been in the $5,000.
They have been.
Okay,
yes.
so these are smaller amounts than in the past.
Yes, they've been $5,000 in the past for BCDI, from Hermione Arts Center. There have been varying amounts from those too, but they have been generally around $5,000, so that's significantly less.
Okay, thanks. You talked a little bit about this year's budget compared to the previous year, but when you look at it sort of over the last few years, does anything stand out other than the things you already covered?
The municipal budget is essentially flat funded. We're seeing a net increase of about $17,000, which is the amount that will be raised from taxes. So that increase of $17,000. So if everything else remained the same, if the school budget remained the same, if the county budget remained the same, then the effect on the tax rate would actually be a decrease of about 30 cents, which is significant for
per
people.
$1,000 valuation.
Per $1,000 of valuation, exactly. So we're really in the municipal budget has very little impact to the tax rate, and as I said, would decrease the tax rate if the other parts of the budget stayed the same.
And the other parts that affect the tax rate are the school budget, SAD 75 budget.
Yes,
and
the county tax.
And the county tax.
Right.
Thanks. So, and then just kind of a final question about the process the budget goes through each year,
Sure.
Just to kind of walk through it as a refresher.
Yep, well, it starts in generally September, before the following July, when the budget goes into effect. That's when I start looking at capital projects, what's been done, what needs to be done, weighing those out, getting requests from department heads for capital projects. And then I review those from September through December generally. And then in December, that's when I send out a request to the department heads for budget proposals for the operating side of the budget. And those are due back to me the end of January. Along with the non-municipal requests, those are by policy due by the end of January. And then I spend February reviewing the budget with department heads, and then present the budget to the Finance Advisory Committee in March, usually the beginning of March. And then the Finance Advisory Committee meets with me and with the department heads and with the representatives from the non-municipal agency organizations to review their requests. And then once that's all done, they have a recommendation, the Finance Advisory Committee has a recommendation to the Select Board, and then the Select Board reviews the budget, usually in one meeting. The thought is that the Finance Advisory Committee has gone over it pretty well, line by line, and so at that point, it's a pretty solid budget.
And when Select Board members are new and need to learn the budget, sometimes you sit down with them and walk through it line by line, which
Absolutely.
can prove helpful.
Absolutely, and I answer questions from Select Board members, outside of meetings on the budget too, and walk them through. Fortunately, we do have 2 former Finance Advisory Committee members on the Select Board.
That helps.
Which definitely helps, and some veterans on the board too, so that they understand the process and they know what they're looking at instead of seeing it just the first time. So they've seen it with kind of veteran eyes, but obviously it's the biggest work product, if you will, for the year.
Sure.
For the town, because that's what we survive on, that's what we implement all of our services with, and all of our projects with for the year.
Anything else ahead of June 14th town meeting you think people should be aware of about the budget, or in general?
I don't think about the budget. If anybody ever has any questions, they certainly can contact me either through email or at the town office. But hopefully, and I know that you're getting some word out too about the ordinance amendments and the moratoriums about the recreational retail marijuana. So that's appreciated too.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for making some time. And hopefully this has been helpful, and we hope to see you at town meeting on June 14th.